Subscribe to Black Voices Matter, where every story speaks truth, power, and emotion. She stood at the gates of a billionaire's mansion, holding a faded photograph close to her chest. Her hands trembled, her voice cracked, and before anyone could stop her, she shouted, "Why is my mom's photo in your mansion?" The guards froze, cameras clicked. And from behind the golden doors, the billionaire himself appeared, calm, confident, and untouchable, until he saw her face. In that instant, everything changed. His steps slowed, his expression turned pale, and the world seemed to stop. Her name was Ava, a black girl who had fought her whole life to survive. She didn't come here for money or fame. She came for the truth, because the photo hanging inside his house was the same one she'd kept since childhood, the only memory she had of her mother. He looked at her, really looked, and whispered a single word, trembling. "Elena." Ava froze. That was her mother's name. He walked closer, his eyes filled with shock and guilt. "You have her eyes," he said softly. "She saved my life and disappeared before I could ever thank her." Tears filled Ava's eyes. "She didn't disappear," she whispered. "She died saving me." The billionaire's knees gave out. He fell to the ground, his voice breaking as he said, "All these years, and she never told me she had a daughter." Silence, only the sound of Ava's heartbeat echoing through the marble halls. He looked up at her and whispered, "Everything I own, every breath I take, it all means nothing without her. You're all I have left of the woman who changed my life." And in that moment, the world finally saw a billionaire with tears in his eyes, not for his fortune, but for the love he lost, and the daughter he never knew existed. Sometimes the truth doesn't break you, it sets your heart free. The sky was heavy with clouds, the kind that promised rain but held back just enough to make the air thick and uneasy. On the far edge of the city, where wealth looked like heaven and poverty felt like hell, stood the Lockwood Mansion, a monument of glass and marble that touched the clouds. Inside those golden gates lived a man whose name carried power, mystery, and fear, Alexander Lockwood, the billionaire no one really knew. Outside the iron gate, a young black woman stood, her clothes worn, her shoes dusty, her eyes tired but burning with determination. Her name was Ava Coleman. For as long as she could remember, life had been about survival. She grew up in foster homes, bounced from place to place, and worked whatever jobs she could find, waitressing, cleaning, singing on the streets. The world hadn't been kind to her, but she had one treasure she guarded with her life, an old, wrinkled photograph of her mother, Elena. In the photo, her mother was smiling, standing beside an old piano, sunlight spilling through a dusty window. On the back, written in faded ink, were the words, "To my little Ava, one day, you'll understand why I had to let go." Ava never understood. Her mother had died when she was 8. Or at least, that's what she had been told. She didn't remember much, only that one night her mother ran out into the rain after a phone call. She never came back. The police found her body near the old bridge, calling it an accident. But Ava always felt something was wrong. Years passed. She learned not to ask questions, not to expect miracles. Until one night, everything changed. A video went viral online, a lifestyle documentary about the reclusive billionaire Alexander Lockwood. He rarely allowed cameras inside his home, but this time he had agreed for a charity segment. The video was only 5 minutes long. But in those 5 minutes, Ava's entire world shattered. At exactly 2 minutes, 17 seconds, she froze the frame. Behind Alexander, hanging on the wall of his study, was a large framed photograph of her mother. The same smile, the same piano, the same faded sunlight. Ava dropped her phone. She replayed the clip, again and again. It was her, there was no doubt. Why was her mother's picture in his mansion? Who was he to her? A storm of emotions built inside her, fear, hope, anger, confusion. She tried to ignore it, but the image haunted her every time she closed her eyes. 3 sleepless nights later, Ava made up her mind. She would find him. She would look him in the eye and demand the truth. The next morning, she took the first bus out of the city. It was a long ride across wealthy neighborhoods and silent streets where everything sparkled. When she finally stood outside the iron gates of Lockwood Mansion, her heart pounded so loud she could barely breathe. The guards looked at her like she didn't belong because she didn't. Not here. But she didn't care. She gripped the photograph in her hand and shouted with all the pain she had buried inside her for years. "Why is my mom's photo in your mansion?" The sound echoed through the marble walls. The guards exchanged glances. One of them reached for his radio, but before he could speak, the massive golden doors at the top of the stairs opened. A tall man stepped out, silver hair, sharp suit, eyes like stone. It was Alexander Lockwood himself. He looked down, confused, as the shouting echoed again. "Why is my mother's picture in your house?" Ava's voice broke this time, a mix of anger and tears. Alexander stared for a long moment. The guards waited for his order, but he didn't speak. He just stared. Something about her face, her eyes, her trembling hands froze him in place. He slowly walked down the stairs, his polished shoes tapping softly against the marble. When he finally stood before her, he whispered in disbelief, "Who are you?" Ava held up the photograph. "This woman," she said, her voice shaking, "is my mother." He looked at the photo, then back at her. His face went pale. "Elena," he breathed. The name slipped from his lips before he could stop it. Ava blinked. "You knew her?" He didn't answer. He couldn't. His throat tightened as memories he had locked away decades ago came flooding back. A woman with music in her soul, kindness in her eyes, and pain she never spoke about. She had walked into his life once, a young jazz singer performing at a small bar downtown. He was a rising investor back then, still human, still capable of love. She had changed everything in his world, made him laugh, made him feel again. And then she vanished. He had spent years looking for her. No trace, no goodbye, nothing. Until now. He looked at Ava again, and the resemblance became undeniable. The same eyes, the same stubborn look. He felt the air leave his lungs. "You have her eyes," he whispered. Ava stepped back, confused. "Why do you have her photo, Mr. Lockwood? Who was she to you?" He swallowed hard. "She saved my life," he said softly, "and then she disappeared before I could thank her." What? Ava's voice cracked. "She didn't disappear. She died saving me." The billionaire's hands trembled. He turned away, staring at the ground. The weight of the truth pressed down like a mountain. He had spent years building empires, chasing money, forgetting that once he had loved someone so deeply it tore him apart when she left. And now her daughter stood before him, proof that life had given him one more chance. The rain finally began to fall. Slow, heavy drops that blurred the world around them. He looked back at her and said quietly, "I searched for her for 20 years. I never found her, but somehow she found me again through you." Ava didn't know whether to cry or scream. The man she'd hated moments ago was now the only link she had left to her mother's past. The mansion lights flickered behind him. Thunder rolled in the distance. 2 lives, one shaped by pain, the other by guilt, stood face to face for the first time, bound by a photograph and a love story buried beneath time and silence. And in that moment, the story truly began. Rain poured harder now, turning the marble stairs into silver mirrors. Ava stood drenched, the photo in her hand slowly soaking, ink bleeding like the past refusing to stay still. Alexander Lockwood didn't move. His eyes stayed fixed on her face, the ghost of a woman he had buried in memory now staring back through this young girl. He finally spoke, his voice quiet, trembling under the storm. "Come inside." Ava hesitated. Everything inside her screamed no. But curiosity, that small, dangerous spark, pushed her forward. The guard stepped aside. The heavy doors closed behind her with a deep echo that sounded like a trap locking shut. Inside the mansion was another world. Crystal chandeliers dripped light, marble floors gleamed like rivers, and paintings of powerful men covered the walls. But one photo stood apart, framed in gold, lit softly from above. Her mother. Ava's breath caught. It was bigger than she'd seen in the video, her mother smiling, holding a glass of wine, wearing a simple white dress. But there was something else now that she could see clearly, a man's hand, resting on her shoulder. She turned sharply toward Alexander. "That's you, isn't it?" He didn't deny it. "Yes," he said, "that was a long time ago." She stepped closer, anger boiling through the tears. "Why didn't you ever tell anyone? Why is her picture here like a secret on your wall?" Alexander sighed, the weight of old memories pulling him down. "Because the world wouldn't understand," he said quietly, "and neither would she." Ava frowned. "What do you mean?" He walked toward the photo, his reflection merging with her mother's image. "When I met Alina, I was just starting out. The investors I worked with, men twice my age, twice as cruel, they wouldn't have accepted her. They believed love could ruin a man's focus, and they were right." His voice trembled. "She changed me. I wasn't chasing money when I was with her. I was chasing peace. But then she vanished. No note, no goodbye, just gone." Ava's heart ached, but her suspicion didn't fade. "You're lying," she whispered. "My mom wasn't the kind of woman to just disappear. Someone made her leave." He turned sharply, eyes flashing. "You think I made her?" "Didn't you?" she fired back. "She died alone working 3 jobs. You had everything and she had nothing." The silence that followed was sharp, painful. The storm outside cracked with thunder. Alexander's jaw tightened. He walked to the grand piano in the corner, covered in dust but still beautiful. He brushed a finger across the keys. "This piano," he said quietly, "was hers." Ava's breath hitched. "What?" "She used to play here," he said, "every night, until the day she left. I never touched it again." He pressed one key. The note echoed through the empty hall, haunting, lonely. Then he turned to her, eyes dark with truth. "Ava, your mother didn't leave me. She was forced to." Ava's body froze. "Forced by who?" He exhaled slowly, the truth burning through his chest. "My father." Ava blinked. "Your father?" "He hated her," Alexander said. "He thought she'd ruin my reputation. I was set to take over his company, a family empire worth billions. He told me if I didn't let her go, he'd destroy her life. And he could. He had power over everything, including the people she worked for." Ava's voice trembled. "So he threatened her." "He didn't just threaten her," Alexander said. "He paid her to disappear. He made sure I never found her." Ava felt dizzy. Her knees weakened. All her life she had wondered why her mother cried at night, why she'd whisper, "Some love isn't allowed, baby." Tears filled her eyes. "She left to protect you." "No," he said softly. "She left to protect you. She was pregnant when she left me, and I never knew." Ava's world shattered. The ground beneath her felt unreal. "You're saying—" He nodded, voice cracking. "You're my daughter." The words hit harder than thunder. Ava stumbled back. Her breath quickened. Her chest ached as if her heart had forgotten how to beat. "No, no, that can't be true." "Look at the photo," he said desperately. "Look at your eyes, your mother's smile, your birth year. The timelines match. I didn't know, Ava. I swear to you I didn't know." Ava shook her head. "You had everything. You could have looked for us." "I did," he shouted. His voice broke. "I spent years searching for her, But by the time I found a trace, she was gone, and I never forgave myself. Tears rolled down his face now, unstoppable. He wasn't a billionaire anymore, not in this moment. He was just a man haunted by regret. Ava turned away, her hands covering her mouth. The truth was too heavy, too cruel. She had hated him before she even knew him, and now he was the blood she never knew she shared. The rain outside softened into a quiet rhythm against the windows. Alexander took a step closer. Ava, I can't change what happened, but if I could trade every dollar I've made to get one more day with your mother, I would. Ava's shoulders shook. She never stopped loving you, she whispered. Even when she was dying, she kept your photo under her pillow. His face crumbled. He dropped to his knees, clutching the frame from the wall. The glass cracked under his grip as he whispered, Elena, I'm so sorry. For a long moment, there was only silence, the kind that feels sacred and unbearable all at once. Then Ava slowly walked toward him. She reached out, touching the broken frame. Their hands met for the first time, father and daughter, bound by loss and truth. Alexander looked up at her through tears. Please, he said softly, don't hate me for the mistakes I didn't know I made. Ava hesitated. Her heart wanted to forgive, but the wounds were deep. She whispered, I don't hate you, but I don't know how to love you either. He nodded slowly, pain written in every line of his face. Then let me earn it, he said. Let me start now. Outside, the storm cleared. The clouds parted, revealing the faintest light. A new beginning, fragile, uncertain, but real. And as Ava looked once more at her mother's photograph, she realized, sometimes, the truth doesn't destroy you. It sets you free. That night, silence filled the Lockwood mansion. The rain had stopped, but the storm inside both of them hadn't. Ava sat in the grand library, the one room that felt alive, lined with old books and the faint scent of her mother's favorite perfume. She couldn't explain it, but somehow, the air felt familiar, as if her mother had once walked these same floors, her laughter echoing through the walls. Alexander Lockwood stood by the fireplace, his shoulders heavy, his glass untouched. For years, this mansion had been his kingdom. Now, it felt like a museum of regrets. Ava finally broke the silence. You said you searched for her. If that's true, why didn't you find out how she died? He turned, his face pale in the dim light. Because I wasn't allowed to, he said softly. When I finally tried to reopen the case, someone made sure I couldn't. Ava frowned. What do you mean? He sighed, setting his glass down. After my father passed, I tried to learn what really happened to Elena, but every file, every report was sealed. And then, my family's lawyer told me to let it go for my own good. Your lawyer, Ava's tone sharpened. What was his name? Howard Grayson, Alexander said. He's been with my family since before I was born. Ava froze. That name. It was in her mother's old letters. Her mother once wrote, I got a call from a man named Grayson. He said they'd help me find safety. Her stomach twisted. Grayson, he's the one who came to our apartment the night before she died. Alexander's eyes widened. What? He told her he'd found a place for us to stay. She was scared, but she trusted him because he said he worked for your family. Ava's breath caught in her throat. That night she got a call. She left the house crying. That was the last time I saw her. Alexander felt the blood drain from his face. He grabbed his phone, shaking. Grayson was here, even after father died. He handled all the estates and every secret. He called his assistant, demanding Grayson's location. When he hung up, his expression had turned from sorrow to fury. He's still in town. Ava rose to her feet. I'm coming with you. He hesitated, then nodded. They left together, driving through the city until they reached an office building downtown, sleek, quiet, expensive. When they entered, the old lawyer looked up, startled. He hadn't seen Alexander in years. "Mr. Lockwood, Miss, may I ask what?" Alexander slammed a folder onto the desk. "Tell me what really happened to Alina Coleman, now." Grayson's smile faded. "Sir, that's—" "Don't," Alexander snapped. "I know my father paid her to disappear, but she died, Grayson, and you were the last man to see her alive, so tell me the truth before I destroy you." The lawyer's eyes darted between them, panic creeping into his voice. "You don't understand, Alexander. Your father's orders." "My father is dead," Alexander barked. "Now talk." Grayson exhaled shakily. "Your father told me to make sure she left quietly. I went to her apartment that night to give her the money, but she refused. She said she didn't care about money. She just wanted to keep her baby safe." Ava's fists clenched. "And then—" I threatened her, told her if she stayed, she'd ruin your life. She ran out into the rain and I followed her, but she slipped on the bridge. I tried to help her, but—" His voice cracked. "She fell." The room went silent. Ava felt her knees buckle. All this time her mother's accident wasn't fate, it was fear, it was power. Alexander's face turned white, his hands shook violently. "You killed her," he whispered. "You didn't just take her away from me, you took everything." Grayson stammered. "It was an accident." "No," Alexander roared. "You took a good woman's life because of my father's greed, and because I was too blind to see it." The old man fell silent, trembling under the billionaire's rage. Ava's tears streamed down her cheeks, but her voice was steady. "You don't deserve forgiveness." Alexander turned to her, broken. "Ava, I can't undo this, but I can make it right." He looked at Grayson with burning eyes. "Every cent my father made, every lie he built, I'll tear it all down if that's what it takes." Grayson shook his head. "You'll ruin the company." "Then let it burn," Alexander said coldly, "because it was built on her pain." He pulled out his phone again and called his media director. "Prepare a statement," he said. "I'm going public. I want the world to know what my father did and what I allowed to happen." Grayson's face went pale. "You'll destroy the Lockwood legacy." Alexander met Ava's eyes. "It's not my legacy anymore, it's hers." The next morning, the story was everywhere. Billionaire confesses, empire built on a lie. Alexander Lockwood reveals secret love and tragic death. Ava watched the news in silence as the world reacted, shock, outrage, pity. But none of that mattered to her. What mattered was that the truth was finally free. Later that day, Alexander stood beside her at the small graveyard outside the city, where a new headstone had just been placed. Yelianace man. Beloved mother, unforgotten soul. Ava placed fresh flowers at the grave, her hands trembling. Alexander knelt beside her, tears falling freely. "I'm so sorry, Alina," he whispered. "I should have fought harder, I should have found you." Ava closed her eyes. For the first time in years, she felt peace, painful but pure. She turned to him and said softly, "She would have forgiven you." He looked up at her, broken yet grateful. "And you?" he asked quietly. Ava hesitated. The wind blew softly through the trees. "I'm trying," she said. He smiled faintly. "That's enough." As they stood together, the sun broke through the clouds, warm, gentle, golden. It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was a beginning. And sometimes that's all a heart needs, a chance to start again. Weeks passed since the truth came out. The world no longer saw Alexander Lockwood as an untouchable billionaire. They saw a man stripped bare, a man who chose truth over empire. Headlines called him everything from foolish to fearless, but for the first time in his life, he didn't care. For him, all that mattered was the promise he made at Alina Coleman's grave. To give back what his family had taken. And standing beside him now, determined, brave, and beautiful in her own light, was Ava, his daughter. They were rebuilding something together, not a company, not an empire, but a legacy of meaning. Ava had always loved music. It was something she got from her mother. She remembered those nights as a little girl, when her mom would hum old jazz tunes while sewing late into the night. That memory was her comfort during the hardest years. One morning, as she sat in the mansion's empty piano room, her mother's piano room, she pressed a single key. It rang softly, pure, like a heartbeat finally finding rhythm again. Alexander stood at the doorway, watching her. "She used to play that same song," he said quietly. Ava smiled faintly. "She taught me a little before she died. I stopped playing after that." He stepped closer, placing a small, leather-bound notebook beside her. "This was hers," he said. Ava's eyes widened. "You had this all this time." "I found it locked away in an old chest after the truth came out," he said. "It's her journal, her music, her thoughts, her dreams." Ava flipped through the pages, sketches of songs, pieces of poetry, and on the last page, a letter written in her mother's delicate handwriting. "If someone finds this, tell my daughter that music can heal what words cannot. And if Alexander ever hears my songs again, tell him I forgave him long before he asked." Ava's tears blurred the ink. She whispered, "She forgave you." Alexander's voice broke. "She was always too kind for this world." They sat together in silence, father and daughter, united by music, by memory, by forgiveness. A few weeks later, Ava called a meeting with Alexander and a few trusted people. She placed her mother's notebook on the table. "I want to start something," she said. "A music foundation in her name. For kids who have talent but no opportunity. For people who have voices the world refuses to hear." Alexander's eyes softened. "Your mother would love that." "I know," Ava said, smiling. "I'm calling it the Alina Foundation for Hope." The next months were a whirlwind. The story of the Alina Foundation spread fast, a place where street kids, struggling artists, and young dreamers could come to learn, to sing, to play. Ava poured her heart into it, teaching, mentoring, helping others the way she wished someone had helped her. And beside her, Alexander quietly funded everything, not for attention but for redemption. There was no press conference, no ribbon-cutting ceremony with cameras. Just a soft opening night filled with music, laughter, and the scent of roses, her mother's favorite. Ava took the stage that night. The lights dimmed and a hush filled the hall. She sat at the same piano her mother once played, fingers trembling over the keys. She whispered into the microphone, "This is for you, Mom. For every woman who had to choose between love and survival. For every voice that was silenced too soon." And then she began to play. The melody was simple, tender, and haunting. Alexander stood at the back of the room, tears glistening in his eyes as the music filled the air. He could almost see Alina there, smiling, proud, her hand resting on Ava's shoulder like before. The audience rose to their feet, clapping through tears. For a moment, Ava looked toward the back and saw him, her father, clapping softly, his heart full. After the event, they stood outside under the warm glow of streetlights. Ava looked up at the stars. "Do you think she can see us?" Alexander smiled faintly. "I don't think she ever stopped watching." Ava nodded, smiling through her tears. "You know, I used to hate the idea of forgiveness. I thought it meant forgetting. But now I understand it just means letting go." He looked at her, pride in his eyes. "You're more like her than you realize." "Maybe," she said softly, "but I'm also like you, I fight back." They both laughed quietly, sincerely, for the first time. Months later, the foundation had become a light for hundreds of kids. Music filled its halls, piano keys, guitar strings, voices that carried dreams. One day, A reporter asked Ava during an interview. You came from nothing, but now you're part of one of the richest families in the world. How do you define success? Ava smiled thoughtfully. Success isn't money, she said. It's being able to look at your past without wanting to erase it. It's turning pain into purpose. My mother taught me that, and my father helped me believe it. The interview went viral. People started calling her the billionaire's daughter with a soul of music. But Ava didn't care about fame. She cared about legacy, one that finally honored her mother's name. One evening, as the sun set over the city, Alexander sat by the mansion's window, looking at the photograph that started it all, Elena's smile, frozen in time. He whispered softly, "We did it, Elena. She's everything you dreamed she'd be." A soft knock came at the door. Ava peeked in. "Hey," she said gently, "you ready?" "For what?" he asked. "For dinner," she said with a grin. "You promised you'd try my homemade pasta." He chuckled. "You're brave. Your mother couldn't cook to save her life." "Then I guess that part came from you," she teased. They both laughed as they walked out together. No walls, no secrets, no shadows. The camera of life slowly pulled back, fading to the soft glow of the mansion's lights against the night sky. Inside, the piano room was silent, but if you listened closely, you could still hear a faint melody echoing through the halls. A mother's song, a daughter's heart, and a man finally forgiven. Sometimes, the story you're searching for isn't about revenge. It's about finding peace in the truth. Subscribe to Black Voices Matter, where every story has a heartbeat.